What is up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to get into my ACC conference tournament predictions video. Not been the typical year for the ACC. Honestly, the past few years, it's not been the best. It's not been the dominant ACC like we're accustomed to seeing, but it's still obviously a Power 5 conference. Obviously has the best of the best with North Carolina and Duke and a lot of good, solid other teams as well. But before we get into this, just wanted to let you guys know, just made my Big 12 tournament predictions video. So check that one out. But anyway, we're going to get into this here. We're going to start out with the standings here. Number 1 seed is North Carolina, finishing 17-3 in conference play. I believe locked up the number 1 seed when they beat number 2 seeded Duke yesterday. Who's 15-5 in conference play right there. Both those teams are the top teams. They're a lock for the NCAA tournament for sure. It's just a matter about what seeding they will get. North Carolina could even maybe get to a 1 seed, especially with Arizona and Tennessee losing yesterday. Duke, I would say probably the 2 seed is a stretch. They would probably have to beat North Carolina in this tournament, but I think at least a 3 seed or a 4 seed for them. Then we get to 3-seeded Virginia, who's 13-7 in conference play. Virginia's right on the cusp of the tournament. If they want to be locked in, I think they've got to at least beat Duke in this tournament. But they're no matter really what happens, unless they win the whole thing, they're up for grabs to see what happens. But then number 4 is Pitt, 12-8. They're also on the bubble right now. Very similar to North Carolina. If they want to make, or Virginia, if they want to make this tournament, they probably have to beat North Carolina. And then number 5 seeded Wake Forest, finishing 11-9 in conference play. Also a team that's on the bubble right now. They've kind of dropped off a bit, but I think if they beat Pitt, obviously when their first matchup beat Pitt, they're in a decent chance, not the best, but then if they win either North Carolina or Duke, obviously they'll have a great chance. But anyway, moving on to number 6, we have Clemson finishing 11-9 in conference play. Clemson, I think they're a lock for the tournament, even though not the best conference. They had a lot of quality wins earlier this year. Joe Lunardi has them about like a 5 seed right now. I expect that to continue even after their loss to Wake Forest yesterday. Then the number 7 seeded team is Syracuse, finishing 11-9 in conference play as well. Syracuse is a team that I would say needs to go on a big run for them to have any chance of making the tournament. Then I think everyone else on this list probably would have to win the entire ACC to make the NCAA tournament. And that starts out with 8-seeded Virginia Tech, finishing 10-10, tied with 9-seeded Florida State, also finishing 10-10 in conference play. Then we have 10-seeded NC State, finishing 9-11 in conference play. 11-seeded Boston College, finishing 8-12. Tied up here, 12-seeded Notre Dame and 13-seed Georgia Tech, all finishing 7-13 in conference play. Then we have 14-seed Miami finishing 6-14 in conference play. A Miami team who at the beginning of ACC was projected to make the field as like an 8 seed. They have completely fallen off, losing 9 straight games. Yeah, they need to, obviously, if they're going to make it, they need to win the entire ACC tournament, which would be a huge task coming from the 14 seed. But then we've seen it happen in the past. But then finally, 15 seed Louisville. It's been evident that this is one of the worst teams in college basketball. They're 3-17 in conference play. All right, with all that, let's get into our predictions here. And that's going to start out with Georgia Tech taking on Notre Dame. Obviously, the 12 versus the 13 matchup here. If we take a look at their matchups, Notre Dame won on the 9th in overtime by 7. That game was being played in Georgia Tech. Then Notre Dame also won by 3 on the 14th. I'm a firm believer that it's very difficult to beat a team 3 times, especially if all those games were close. I expect Georgia Tech to come out on a neutral site, get this win, this slight upset. These two are all tied for conference play, so I expect this to be a Georgia Tech win there, right there. Okay, next matchup we have 10-seeded. I believe this is the next one. Yeah, 10-seeded NC State taking on Louisville. Not going to go into too much analysis here. Whoops. Sorry, this is all mixed up. I'm just going to write down. I'm going to go with NC State. Louisville is the worst team in the conference. I'm not even going to look at their previous games. I do not expect Louisville to win that one. All right. Then 11-seeded Boston College, 14-seed Miami. Miami's a team, man, losing 9 straight games. It would be very difficult for them to beat Boston College. Let's take a look here. These two played on the 17th of February. Boston College won, and then they just met last Wednesday, and Boston College won by 10. So obviously, like I said, it's tough to beat a team 3 times, but Miami's on a 9-game losing skid. They're completely falling apart right now. Do I expect them to beat a Boston College team who's on a 2-game winning streak in this tournament? I do not. So give me Boston College to get the job done. All right, the Wednesday games now. We have Virginia Tech, Florida State battling it out. 2 decent teams in the ACC, 8 and 9. These two met on the 6th of January. Florida State won by 3. That was being played in Florida State. And then Virginia Tech got their revenge on the 13th and won by 8. I'm going to go with Virginia Tech. They're a hot team right now, winning 3 straight. I do believe they are the slightly better team as well. Florida State's a good program, but I don't see them winning this one. Give me Virginia Tech to move on to play North Carolina. And then we have Wake Forest taking on Georgia Tech. Wake Forest here. Georgia Tech, the 13 seed. Let's see. Wake Forest, obviously a bubble team right now. They beat Georgia Tech by 29 points on the road on the 6th. That was a statement win for Wake Forest. And then they met. Georgia Tech actually won last Tuesday by a point. That game was being played in Wake Forest. Wake Forest is a team that had a great February, but the end of February very much struggled. A team that kind of was dipping, but I do believe with their season on the line, they will handle business against Georgia Tech. I wouldn't honestly be shocked if Georgia Tech beats Notre Dame and then pulls off a big-time upset over Wake Forest, but I am going to go with Wake Forest in that one. All right, Syracuse, NC State, 7 versus a 10 seed. Let's take a look here. Syracuse did beat NC State by 8 on January 27th. And then Syracuse beat NC State by 4 on the road. So like I said, it's tough to beat a team 3 times in 1 year. But I am going to give this one to 7-seeded Syracuse. NC State's on a 4-game losing skid right now, coming off a game versus Louisville, which honestly could give them a slight advantage because it's, getting prepared for this tournament. They get an easy win. I'm going to just count out Louisville in that game. But I don't expect, Syracuse is a good team. I do think they can come out and win this one, but I think this one could be a tight battle. But yeah, give me Syracuse in that one. And then 6-seeded Clemson versus 11-seeded Boston College. Clemson's an interesting team here that I think is overrated. On the 13th of January, Clemson beat Boston College by 11. And then that was their only other matchup between these two. I'm going to go with an upset pick here. I'm going to go with 11-seeded Boston College. Like I said, guys, I'm just not a believer in Clemson. Not only have they kind of struggled as of late, but honestly, just all year I've had a bad feeling about them. I think this is a team that can get upset in the actual NCAA tournament. I like Boston College to, come off a win versus Miami and then spoil Clemson right there. So give me an upset pick with Boston College pulling off the win. All right, now we get to the quarterfinals here. We got North Carolina taking on Virginia Tech. These two met. These two met. When did they? They met on the 17th, and North Carolina dominated. That's what I expect to happen again. This North Carolina team had a little bit of a weird February, but middle of February to beginning, but ever since they've been a really good team and been winning some great games. Obviously beat Duke last night. But yeah, then we have the next matchup, Pitt versus Wake Forest. This is actually a big game for the NCAA tournament for these two. Like I said, I think these two probably would have to beat North Carolina to be for sure safe. But if we look at them, Pitt beat Wake Forest by 5 on the 31st of January. And then Wake Forest dominated them on the 20th of February. It's an interesting game. I think that Wake Forest is coming off a game against Georgia Tech that I think will be closer than a lot of people anticipate. I'm gonna go with the rising Pitt team, not Wake Forest. I'm gonna go with Pitt to win this one. I do believe that this Pitt team's playing good basketball right now. Wake Forest, on the other hand, is trending downwards. So I'm going to go with that. And I do believe Wake Forest will have a tough matchup that they'll already have to deal with against Georgia Tech. All right, Duke versus Syracuse. 2 versus a 7 seed. Let's take a look. On the 2nd of January, first game in ACC, Duke dominated Syracuse. That was being played at Duke. And that was their only matchup this year. So Syracuse is coming off an interesting game, but I don't see him upsetting Duke. Give me the Blue Devils. All right, Virginia taking on Boston College. 3 versus 11. Interesting game. Boston College is going to have to... I think that Virginia probably would want to play Clemson to ensure more of an NCAA tournament hope, because if they lose to Boston College, they're kind of done. On the 28th, they just barely beat Boston College by 4 points. So maybe watch out for an upset here, but I do have Virginia winning. Boston College, that would be massive for them if they can go on this hot streak and beat Virginia as well. That would probably knock out Virginia from the tournament, but I do like Virginia to pull off that one. All right, semifinals time. We have 1-seeded North Carolina, 4-seed Pitt. We take a look here. The 2nd of January, North Carolina beat Pitt on the road by 13. Believe, that was their only matchup. So, big game between two good teams here. I am going to go with North Carolina, though. Like I said, it's so hard to beat them. Unfortunately, I do think that probably Pitt would be... I don't think they would make the NCAA tournament if they lose to North Carolina. So that's a big game for them. We'll see what happens, but give me North Carolina. And then Duke versus Virginia, 2 versus a 3. Duke dominated Virginia just on the 2nd of March. And did these two play any other time? Nope, they did not. I'm going to be honest, not the biggest believer in Virginia, so give me Duke. Virginia still probably will be in the field, even with that loss to Duke. But if it's a blowout, you never know. But I do think that Duke will probably win that one pretty good. So then we do have North Carolina, Duke. North Carolina would have to beat Duke 3 times in one season for them to against Duke. You know, obviously we know what happened. This is an historic rivalry. I do think it's setting up that it will be these two in this game. But I do have North Carolina. Interesting matchup. I think it's going to be a close game. I think North Carolina is coming on at the right time, though. So I know it's very difficult to beat a team 3 times in 1 year, But I do think this North Carolina team's experienced. I think they're playing great basketball. Duke, they're a decent team, but I do think they'll probably lose this one. So give me North Carolina to win the ACC. I know that's a basic answer, but that's the one I got. All right, anyway, guys, thank you all for watching my ACC tournament predictions video. Comment down below what you think. Do you think that one of these bubble teams can go on a run, or do you think it'll probably be North Carolina like I expect? But anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. Peace out.